are listening to 106.7, Wilmington's Big Talker, and my name is Paul Vallone. I'd like to welcome you to Guns, Politics, and Freedom, where each Sunday at 5 p.m., as part of the Sunday Night Political Power Block, we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at hyattguns.com. In case you aren't familiar with me, I direct Grassroots North Carolina, or GRNC, since 1994, our state's most effective gun rights organization. As its director, I was involved in drafting and passing our original concealed handgun law. Since then, GRNC has gone on to engineer passage of concealed handgun reciprocity, our purchase permit bypass, Castle Doctrine and Stand Your Ground, the expansion of concealed carry into state and municipal parks, restaurants, public assemblies, educational properties, and much more. Grassroots North Carolina is exactly what the name implies, a grassroots collection of people from all walks of life who share a common concern that our constitutionally guaranteed freedoms are being eroded. Check us out at grnc.org. That's grnc.org. In today's show, we will discuss what is a clear and present danger to gun rights both here in North Carolina and on the national stage, namely efforts by the political left to regroup in the 2018 elections. Some have predicted a blue wave will sweep the country, bringing leftists into office on the tide and undoing gains we have recently made. Others have posited that Donald Trump's popularity among his base will turn the tide and may even increase conservative gains. But what few discuss are the means by which the left is doing its best to rig the game, to change the rules of elections, right here in North Carolina and elsewhere, to ensure that they get their chance to impose their agenda, their socialist utopia, on you. And that will be the topic of discussion later in the show. But first, let's take a look at recent news. The left routinely claims to promote tolerance and diversity, when in truth what they exercise is the naked pursuit of power and control, Orwellian control over you, what you say, what you do, even what you think. You see, it is never enough that leftists be allowed to think or do what they see fit. Instead, they aren't satisfied until you approve of their agenda. By way of example, gays aren't happy just being out of the closet. If you believe in traditional marriage, they want you in the closet. If they believe in the religion of global warming, no dissent is possible. Agree, or else you are a heretic. Whatever the topic, environment, guns, abortion, or open borders, conservatives need to understand that these aren't merely their goals, they are their weapons. And the weapons are being used to bring you to heel, to ensure that their control over you is complete. To that end, we are introducing a new semi-regular segment to our show entitled This Just In from The Voice of Tolerance. Once, while I was at my day job as an airline pilot, a coworker overheard me in the crew room speaking by phone with legislators about a bill that we at Grassroots North Carolina were running. She said, "Are you with the union?" She thought I was doing union politics. I replied, "No, I'm afraid I'm part of that vast right-wing conspiracy described by Hillary Clinton. I run conservative political organizations." She fairly spat at me. "I'm a liberal." I said, "That's okay, I forgive you." She said, "Well, I don't forgive you." I said, "Of course not. The ostensible voice of tolerance is in truth rarely tolerant." So for today, this just in from the Voice of Tolerance, we'll talk about leftists who want open borders not merely for humanitarian reasons, but instead to destroy American society for the purpose of reconstructing it according to their utopian, and yes, authoritarian, ideals. The latest incarnation, of course, is the movement to abolish ICE. But imagine the surprise of St. Petersburg businessman Chuck Prather, who discovered flyers spread all around the city with his picture, calling him a predator, who, and I quote, directly profits from sexual violence, physical abuse, and the caging of undocumented people in the greater Tampa community. Sounds awful. Said Prather, I was taking my son to school yesterday when my elderly neighbor who walks dogs for a living came up and said to me, I need to talk to you. She said, there are posters all over town. It has a big picture of you and it says that you're a predator. What's going on? They're trying to terrorize me, Prather told Fox News. They, of course, are the Open Borders protesters. But why would they target an innocent St. Petersburg businessman? Well, that's because Prather had the audacity to rent a Tampa office building to the U.S. government, which had in turn rented it to the office of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Bureau, or ICE. Well, Chuck, I hope you learned your lesson from this, and the lesson is that one must never underestimate the depravity of the American political left. Schadenfreude. That wonderful German word describes the pleasure one feels for the misfortune of others, particularly when those others are, in this case, leftists. Now, I realize I should be ashamed of myself. I really should, but I couldn't help but laugh when I read this. Above one of those infuriating pictures of two lefties, she with a big, stupid, toothy grin below her horn-rimmed glasses and her bike helmet, him with that smug lefty look that says he's smarter than you are, and of course with both of them framed in front of a mountain range in their travels by bike through cultures they undoubtedly consider superior to our own. Now, above that picture was this headline: American couple believing, quote, evil is a make-believe concept, end quote, bike through territory near Afghan border. ISIS stabs them to death. On their 369-day venture around the world, probably at taxpayer expense if I had to guess, while in Morocco, Mr. Leftist wrote this in his diary. You watch the news, you read the papers, and you're led to believe that the world is a big, scary place. People, the narrative goes, are not to be trusted. People are bad, people are evil, people are axe murderers and monsters and worse. He's a pretty good writer. I don't buy it, he says. Evil is a make-believe concept we've invented to deal with the complexities of fellow humans holding values and beliefs and perspectives different than our own. It's easier to dismiss an opinion as abhorrent than strive to understand it. Badness exists, sure, but even that's quite rare. By and large, humans are kind. Self-interested sometimes, myopic sometimes, but kind. Generous and wonderful and kind. No greater revelation has come from our journey than this. Oh yeah, he also wrote about his shame at being American. Quote, on the television across the room, Al Jazeera plays softly. Isn't that cute? Anyways, he goes on to say, Donald Trump has just announced his plans to move an embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and the Muslim world is visibly upset. Leaving Rabat a week earlier, we pedaled right by a massive, peaceful demonstration against the relocation. The television broadcasts footage of protests just like that one, stewing up all across the Maghreb, the Middle East, and beyond. As a clip plays of a sullen Trump waddling across the screen, I do my best to disappear into the soft plush of the couch cushion behind me. But American as I may be, no one here seems to mind. Then says the Daily Wire, then on July 29th, 2018, as they were riding their bikes with two other cyclists in Tajikistan, 5 men exited their car and stabbed all the bicyclists to death. The New York Times reported, quote, a grainy cell phone clip recorded by a driver shows what happened next. The men's Daewoo sedan passes the cyclist and makes a sharp U-turn. It doubles back and aims directly for the bikers, ramming into them and then lurching over their fallen forms. In all, 4 people were killed. Mr. Austin, Ms. Geo Gieden, I don't know how, and cyclists from Switzerland and the Netherlands. 2 days later, the Islamic State released a video showing 5 men it identified as the attackers sitting before the ISIS flag. They faced the camera and made a vow to kill disbelievers. Anyways, please forgive me, but I can say only what I said to a do-gooder who once read the headline of my newspaper over my shoulder, I hate that, while in line at a Starbucks after the Heaven's Gate cult had committed mass suicide. He said, "Oh, that's really awful." And I just said, "Bad genes out of the pool." You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, wilmingtonbigtalker.com. We're going to take a short break, after which we will come back to give you more ammunition to better defend your gun rights. My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, wilmingtonbigtalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at hyattguns.com. In a moment, we're going to talk about what is a clear and present danger to your gun rights presented in the 2018 elections. But first, I'd like to follow up with a segment we have come to run called The End of the World as We Know It.
It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world.
Here we have a quote from USA Today. It was the quote of the day, in fact, the best and wisest quote they could find for the day of August 17th. I will read the quote and let it stand for itself. And I quote, "The day I met her, I was like, hey, I'll marry you tomorrow. I sent her a picture of engagement rings. I was like, do you like any of these? She was like, they're my favorite ones. And I was like, sick." That was Pete Davidson to GQ describing the immediate attraction he felt for now fiancée, Ariana Grande.
It's the end of the world as we know it. And I feel fine.
On that inspiring note, we have a question. Will a blue wave sweep conservatives out of office here in North Carolina? In previous episodes of the show, we detailed how a California super PAC, founded by Hollywood screenwriter Sarah Ullman and funded to the tune of several $100,000 by filmmaker Joss Whedon, who incidentally sits on the creative board for anti-gun billionaire Michael Bloomberg's AstroTurf organization calling itself Everytown for Gun Safety, and how they've targeted North Carolina races, especially judicial races, similar to the way their political action committee shifted a half-dozen Virginia seats from Republican to Democrat control as part of its Turn Virginia Blue campaign. Let's hear Sarah's own words in describing her intent. And I quote, "There are huge opportunities for big gains in states like North Carolina, which has just had its district lines redrawn because of a racial gerrymandering case." Ullman's anti-gun super PAC, One Vote at a Time, is already pushing for two left-wing judicial candidates, namely Anita Earls for North Carolina Supreme Court and Allegra Collins for North Carolina Court of Appeals. If the left is to be believed, a blue wave will sweep the country in November, bringing liberals to power in a stinging rebuke of both Donald Trump and conservative ideals. On the other hand, leftists have a talent for snatching defeat from the jaws of victory by getting overconfident and revealing their true agenda, such as fully opening the border and allowing illegal aliens to vote or repealing the Second Amendment. That said, if the stupid party, Republicans, who have failed to fulfill promises to conservative voters, for example, the Senate failure to pass House Bill 746 right here for permitless concealed carry, if they manage to lose control of the General Assembly, we will experience a gun control wave like none we have ever seen. Worse, as described below, we are experiencing leftist judicial activism in ways previously unseen as Obama appointees have struck down political districts and election laws. We'll talk about that in detail. General Assembly conservatives are being targeted by leftist organizations, including out-of-state money. Both anti-gun Democrat Governor Roy Cooper and anti-gun Democrat Attorney General Josh Stein have long histories of pushing gun bans. If a Democrat-controlled legislature sends them gun control, Cooper will sign it, and Stein will cheerfully enforce it. New and less favorable districts forced on us by leftist judges, as we will describe later, mean that the probable loss of seats by Republicans in the General Assembly. In the North Carolina Senate, Democrats are targeting Senators Mike Lee, Republican of New Hanover, Wesley Meredith, Republican of Cumberland, Jeff Tart, Republican Mecklenburg, and Trudy Wade of Guilford. In the North Carolina House, Republican candidates targeted by Democrats include Nelson Dollar in Wake County, Andy Doolin in Mecklenburg County, Michael Speciale of Beaufort, Craven, and Pamlico, and Larry Yarborough of Granville and Person, among others. Oh, of course, as always, pro-gun, probably the most pro-gun guy in the North Carolina House, Larry Pittman, is a perennial target for leftists, and he faces a well-funded opponent. Now, let's talk about judicial cases, which are crucial to gun rights. As discussed in a previous episode of the show by Republican candidate for North Carolina Court of Appeals, Chuck Kitchen, judicial Democrats are disguising themselves as Republicans. Yes, in their seemingly endless box of dirty tricks, Democrats are now exploiting new rules requiring judges to finally identify their party affiliation by registering Democrats as Republicans, thereby splitting the Republican vote to elect more leftists to the judiciary. The good news is that legislators passed legislation to prevent exactly this deception. The bad news is that leftist courts again exercised judicial activism to once again strike down the legislation passed, and as the result of litigation filed by 3 Constitution Party members, Democrats will now be able to disguise themselves as Republicans in judicial races. Note, not all Constitution parties will be conservatives either, as at least one Democrat plant, Chris Anglin, is hiding behind Constitution Party camouflage. Now, please note that the real Republicans running are Barbara Jackson for North Carolina Court and Andrew Heath, Jefferson Griffin, and Chuck Kitchen for Court of Appeals. Again, Barbara Jackson for North Carolina Supreme Court is the real Republican, as are Andrew Heath, Jefferson Griffin, and Chuck Kitchen for North Carolina Court of Appeals. Our Political Action Committee, the GRNC Political Victory Fund, plans on being active in judicial races. Now, congressional conservatives are equally at risk. While most pro-gun conservatives in North Carolina's 13 congressional districts were previously considered safe, I say previously, 2 are at particular risk. The first is in the 9th Congressional District, presently served by Robert Pittenger. You may recall the GRNC Political Victory Fund withdrew its long-standing support for Pittenger after he voted for gun control earlier this year. With GRNC Political Victory Fund support, Mark Harris, Republican of 9th District with a 4-star GRNC evaluation, he won the Republican primary, but is perceived as vulnerable by Democrats and is being targeted nationally. Pro-gun Republican Ted Budd in the 13th Congressional District, also, by the way, a GRNC 4-star candidate, is also under national pressure from Democrats, both because he is a freshman and because he has lagged in fundraising. Once again, our Political Action Committee, the GRNC Political Victory Fund, plans on being active in both the 9th and 13th Congressional Districts. But in a development even commented on by President Trump when he recently visited Charlotte, our congressional districts were gutted in a last-minute left-wing court decision by yet another Obama judicial appointee. Now, political gerrymandering is a long-established practice, which actually predates the creation of Congress in 1789, in which political parties in control get to draw the political districts which typically favor the party in control. So far, the U.S. Supreme Court has left that process intact. Indeed, shrewd gerrymandering is what kept the North Carolina Blues in charge of an essentially red state for decades. Yet, just 2 months before national elections, yet another Obama appointee judge has dealt yet another blow to conservatives in an activist decision striking down our congressional districts, which had already been required to be redrawn. In a piece entitled, "Court Ruling Against North Carolina Districts Could Leave House Control in Limbo Until 2019, Fox News notes that up to 6 Republicans in North Carolina's congressional delegation could be threatened by the decision, which could cost Republicans control of the U.S. House. Said the piece, and I quote, "In Monday's ruling, U.S. Circuit Court Judge James Wynn wrote that the North Carolina's General Assembly expressly directed the lawmakers and consultants responsible for crafting the congressional district map to rely on political data. Heaven forbid." The Obama appointee wrote the decision for the 3-judge panel, which ruled 2-1 against the districts. We should note that in June, the U.S. Supreme Court rejected the redistricting challenge, leaving the districts in place and remanding the case back to the lower court, which apparently has once again seen fit to strike down the districts. Although the decision is expected to be appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, the left-wing judicial activists of the lower court seem to be relying on the fact that until a replacement for Anthony Kennedy can be found, the High Court has 4 liberals and 4 conservatives, meaning any decision until Brett Kavanaugh is confirmed, which the Democrats are stalling, will likely be a 4-4 tie, leaving the striking of the districts in place. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Please join us after the break as we take a look at the threat to gun rights being presented by left-wing judicial activists. My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Gun Shop, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. Now, before our break, we were discussing how left-wing judges are using judicial activism to change North Carolina election laws to favor Democrats, including, most recently, striking down congressional districts. As we mentioned, political gerrymandering is nothing new. It actually predates the creation of Congress, and in fact has been left largely intact by the United States Supreme Court. Indeed, gerrymandering is what kept the Democrats in charge of what has been an essentially conservative state for decades. Yet just months before the elections, an Obama judicial appointee has struck yet another blow to conservatives in an activist decision striking down congressional districts. And this could place as many as 6 Republican-controlled districts at risk and could, in fact, cost control of the United States House of Representatives. It's that fine an edge right now that people are fighting for. So I would love to tell you that this is the full extent of the malfeasance of Obama appointee judges in striking down North Carolina election laws. But unfortunately, they've been doing that since at least 2016. In fact, it was in July of 2016 that a 3-judge panel of the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is fast earning a reputation for being as left-wing as the notorious Ninth Circuit in San Francisco, the Fourth Circuit struck down North Carolina's recently passed voter ID law. In a statement issued at the time, North Carolina President Pro Tem Phil Berger and North Carolina House Speaker Tim Moore issued a joint statement saying, and I quote, "Since today's decision by 3 partisan Democrats ignores legal precedent, ignores the fact that other federal courts have used North Carolina's law as a model, and ignores the fact that a majority of other states have similar protections in place, we can only wonder if the intent is to reopen the door for voter fraud, potentially allowing fellow Democrat politicians like Hillary Clinton and Roy Cooper to steal the election. This, of course, was prior to the 2016 elections. The three-judge panel, we should note, included one appointee by Bill Clinton and two by Barack Obama. Coincidence? I think not. Then, less than a year later, in 2017, a three-judge panel of federal judges struck down 28 North Carolina House and North Carolina Senate districts as being, and I quote, racially gerrymandered, creating the opportunity Sarah Ullman's anti-gun super PAC now seeks to exploit in electing anti-gun candidates. And then just earlier this month, yet another Obama appointee, U.S. District Judge Loretta Briggs, struck down yet another law designed to prevent voter fraud. The Obama appointee struck down the voter residency challenge law by claiming it was preempted by the state's Democrat-passed motor voter law. To describe this particular travesty, allow me to quote the Associated Press. And I quote, Briggs had ordered days before the 2016 elections that Cumberland, Moore, and Beaufort counties restore thousands of canceled voter registrations. She acted after the NAACP and others sued, alleging the purge of voter rolls disproportionately targeted blacks. Biggs concluded that the three counties had purged between 3,500 and 4,000 voters from registration rolls since August of 2016. The news piece goes on to say, and I quote, the people who had challenged valid residency of voters, filing challenges in Cumberland and Moore counties, were volunteers with the Voter Integrity Project, which, by the way, does excellent work. The group's North Carolina director, Jay Delancey, said it was part of an effort to reduce the potential for voter fraud. He said, and I quote, we followed North Carolina's law scrupulously in filing more than 6,000 individualized voter challenges in 2016, and the local election boards acted properly in sustaining those challenges, he said Wednesday. He said his group would ask state legislators to revise the law, quote, to empower private citizens wishing to detect and challenge illegal voters. And I quote, Moore County Attorney Misty Leyland said her county's election board had done as the state law required and the state election board directed. Attorneys for Beaufort and Cumberland counties did not respond to invitations to comment. The piece goes on to say, in most cases cited by the NAACP lawsuit, residency challenges followed after mail to a voter was returned as undeliverable. County election boards can accept return mail as evidence that the voter doesn't live there. That resulted in a hearing at which challengers presented evidence according to a state legal filing. If local officials found probable cause, the challenged voter was then given notice of a subsequent hearing. A voter who doesn't rebut the evidence can be removed. Now, I don't know about you, but that voter residency law sounds pretty reasonable to me. Oh yes, among the avalanche of leftist court decisions, this month we also experienced overturning of the legislation designed to prevent false flag runs by candidates who are bent on disguising their true political leanings. Here we go again. Said the Tribune News Service, and I quote, the state's newly formed Constitution Party and three of its candidates won a victory in federal court Wednesday morning when a judge ruled that they must be on the ballot this fall despite a law that the state legislature passed earlier this summer taking their names off the ballot. Now, this isn't really about the Constitution Party. I would argue that some of these people are just useful idiots. The piece goes on to say, that follows a victory in state court for Chris Anglin, a state Supreme Court candidate whose campaign had been targeted by a different law seeking to stop him from having his Republican Party affiliation listed on the ballot. Anglin switched parties. Here's the key. Anglin switched parties before running, and Republicans say he's a Democrat plant. Although he insists, of course, he's a legitimate conservative. Yeah, right. But more important, I guess, than the Constitution Party candidates, once again, this decision allows false flag Democrats to split Republican votes in judicial elections. Okay, that's the objective here. You're now going to have 2 Republicans and a Democrat on the ballot. Republicans won't know who to vote for. The vote will be split, and that will elect the Democrat to the Supreme Court or the appellate courts, as the case may be. It's difficult to say exactly, it's difficult to describe the level of malfeasance in the courts in manipulating an election process in order to, I guess, produce preordained political conclusions. Our Political Action Committee, the GRNC Political Victory Fund, plans to be very active in this election. I will mention more about it later, but I encourage you to go to grnc.org, grnc.org. And on the top center of the page, you will find a link for the GRNC Political Victory Fund. The GRNC Political Victory Fund will be doing independent expenditures. We do not give money to candidates. We will be doing independent expenditures in order to, impact elections. We cannot use our organizational or membership money to impact elections. That's prohibited or restricted by law. So we have to raise money separately for our Political Action Committee. I strongly encourage you to contribute to the GRNC Political Victory Fund to elect pro-gun conservatives to not only the North Carolina House and the North Carolina Senate, but also judicial seats and congressional seats. We will be focusing on all of those races. And frankly, I'm feeling we're the finger in the dike at this point in time because we have both national and state trends and the manipulation of election laws all working against us. So we really need gun voters to become active in the 2018 elections and to support political action committees and candidates who support the Second Amendment. Again, grnc.org. At this point, we are going to take a short break, after which we will resume with our description of how leftist judges are undermining voter preferences, as well as laws designed to prevent voter fraud in order to secure left-wing victories. This is Guns, Politics, and Freedom, Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7. We'll be back after the break. My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Gun Shop, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. Before our break, we were discussing how left-wing judges are using judicial activism to change North Carolina election laws in favor of Democrats, including, most recently, striking down congressional districts. Oh, and the initiatives placed by Republicans on the ballot for November are also under fire. Beyond meddling with the language of ballot initiatives for judicial appointments and the still pending voter ID law, earlier struck down by Obama appointees, leftists are also complaining about one added by the North Carolina Senate, which establishes a right to hunt and fish. And I quote, "There are no threats to the right to hunt and fish in North Carolina," State Senator Floyd McKissick told Fox News. This is just a move by Republican lawmakers to motivate their base to go to the polls on Election Day because they're worried they are at risk of losing power. In truth, even if Republicans did add the measure to motivate Republican voters, the strategy is far from unusual and has been employed by both parties to increase voter turnout. And last but not least, in our list of election threats, we have this little gem from the Raleigh News and Observer. The headline says, Obama endorses 6 candidates for North Carolina legislature. Says the piece, and I quote, Wiley Nickel of Cary, who used to work for Obama, received an endorsement from his former boss for an open state Senate seat. Nickel faces Republican Paul Smith and Libertarian Brian Irving. Also making Obama's list, Terrence Everett of Wake Forest against incumbent Republican Chris Malone, Julie Von Haffen of Apex, who is running against incumbent Republican and lead House budget writer Nelson Dollar, and lawyer Sidney Batch, who is running for an open seat against Republican lawyer John B. Adcock. Obama also endorsed Rachel Hunt, former Governor Jim Hunt's daughter, in her race against incumbent Republican Bill Brawley in Mecklenburg County, and Ron Hessen running for an open seat in northeastern North Carolina's District 1 against Republican Ed Goodwin. On a different note, our friend and researcher John R. Lott, who has been on this show, has done it again. His Crime Prevention Research Center, I believe that's cprc.org, and they deserve your support, by the way. He has once again debunked what everyone knows about homicides committed with guns. In a piece on Fox News entitled, Study Claiming U.S. is Home of 1/3 of Mass Shooters Worldwide Debunked, figure less than 1.5%. I'm going to quote this piece because I think everyone needs to hear this. A widely popularized study adopted by the Obama administration claiming the U.S. has by far the most mass public shooters in the world has been criticized and dismissed by new research. John R. Lott, Jr., president of the Crime Prevention Research Center and the author of the new study, has always been skeptical of the research by Adam Lankford, a professor at the University of Alabama, whose work gained special prominence after then-President Barack Obama cited his study in remarks about the San Bernardino attack in December 2015. Lott raised alarm bells that Lankford, who found that between 1966 and 2012, the U.S. had 31% of public mass shooters in the world, despite accounting for less than 5% of the population, did not do diligent research and refused to be transparent about his work, including not sharing his paper with others as he started his media blitz tour promoting the study in 2015. So much for peer-reviewed research, huh? Lott, let's see, here's an amazing thing, Lott says. Lankford refuses to provide his list of cases. He refuses to explain exactly how he got it. This is not some normal academic study. President Obama many times cited this study as a source for his claims. I can't find any other academic research that's gotten so much worldwide attention, Lott told Fox News, adding that people across the world heard about the study. Despite that, the study became go-to research across the media, with the New York Times and CNN frequently citing it. No fake news here. Just this Wednesday, liberal news site Vox referenced a CNN article that cited Lankford's work. I love this one. Lankford declined an interview request about his study and told Fox News in an email that, quote, he's not interested in giving any serious thought to John Lott or his claims. With little success to stop the myth of mass shootings as a uniquely American problem becoming ingrained across the world, Lott took the matter into his own hands, releasing a comprehensive study this week that debunks Lankford's claims. After crunching the numbers, Lott concluded in his study that the U.S. accounts for less than 3% of the world's mass public shootings over a 15-year period from between 1998 and 2012, which is significantly lower than what Lankford's work has shown. Quote, my most conservative count is well over 3,000 shooters over just the last 15 years. My best count is that there were 10,800 of these public mass shooters over the last 15 years, said Lott. He looked at 15 years rather than 47 years as Lankford did because it's nearly impossible to come up with a perfectly accurate information about mass shooters in, for example, Africa in the 1960s. Yeah, no kidding. My most conservative count is well over 3,000 shooters over the last 15 years. My best count is that there were 10,800 of these mass public shooters over the last 15 years, Lott said. Compare that with Lankford's research, which found merely 292 mass public shooters over a 47-year period across the world, with 90 of those in the U.S. per his research. So Lankford found 292 mass public shootings, while Lott found 10,800. Of those, Lankford had 90 in the U.S., and instead of being a third, that's really only less than 3%. Got it. Lott is committed to transparency about his study, listing every single case used in the research in a massive 451-page appendix of the study. He claims to have used the University of Maryland's Global Terrorism Database, complemented by additional search tools to find cases that weren't listed in the dataset. Of 1,491 mass public shootings reviewed by Lott, only 43 of those were in the U.S. This represents just 2.88% of all the cases. In per capita terms, the data put the U.S. below Finland, Norway, and Switzerland. It's still slightly higher than other Western countries, such as France, Germany, or the United Kingdom. Lankford's main conclusion of his data was that there's something in the American culture that makes people commit more public mass shootings than people in other cultures. For Lott, the actual data shows that the mass shooter problem in the U.S. is far from being a unique American experience. His question remains how the media and a president was able to get away with pushing a botched study published in a low-rank journal, despite criticism. Fake news. Well, we've been talking a lot about fake news recently. I suggest we coin a brand new phrase: fake research. Fake research would be the type of research being promulgated at the Johns Hopkins University's Michael Bloomberg School of Public Health, for example. Basically, it involves studies which, in the words of one academic researcher, are designed to validate preordained political conclusions. Fake research. I want you to use that phrase in letters to the editor and other, debates, anything you may happen to participate in, but let's get that phrase into the public lexicon: fake research. Meanwhile, as I have said, we face some serious threats in the 2018 elections, and the GRNC Political Victory Fund is going to do its best to counter those threats. We can't do it without your help. So I'm asking you to contribute to the Grassroots North Carolina Political Victory Fund by going to GRNC, that's like Grassroots North Carolina, grnc.org. In the center of the page, you will see a link on the drop-down menu for the GRNC Political Victory Fund. Please contribute. We cannot use membership money to impact elections. Meanwhile, my name is Paul Vallone, and you have been listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7 WilmingtonBigTalker.com, where each Sunday at 5, as part of the Sunday Night Political Power Block, we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. Please check out our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop, at HyattGuns.com. And please check out my website at GunsPoliticsAndFreedom.com. See you next Sunday at 5.